No. Alcoholism being a disease does not mean that you are not responsible for the management of that disease.
Right.
You are responsible if you are a diabetic, that if you have all the information, if you've been diagnosed, if you know that if you eat an entire chocolate cake that you're going to go through ketosis,
right,
then yes, we can yell at you. We can yell at you for being a diabetic who did not manage their symptoms after knowing.
That was my guest this week, performer and composer Nathan Siler, chief architect of the New York post-punk prog rock band Portraiture. You're listening to the Recover Yourself podcast, and because you're listening, don't be surprised if over the next few weeks, things that used to be good enough are no longer good enough, because that is what's at the core of this podcast, to get each of us to question, is my life good enough for me? I'm your host, MartinJon, and I'm excited to present Nathan this week. As an artist, I always relish connecting with other creatives, especially around recovery. Nathan's band Portraiture, as he describes it, exists because of his sobriety, and ironically, the portrait work I've done has existed because of mine. Nathan is also a recent parent, so we dive deep into talking about how much growth it takes to love as much as parenting requires. There's a lot of information in between the lines of this episode, so please converse and leave comments and questions and thoughts you might have about our conversation. And I encourage you to share this episode if it resonates with you.
Yeah, Nathan, thank you for joining me. Now, Portraiture.
Yes.
When did Portraiture start? How is that related to your sobriety?
Sure. Portraiture is a band that grew out of a band out in Oklahoma City. It used to be called the Fellowship Students. And all five of us and the Fellowship Students were writers, and we wrote songs for the Fellowship Students. So we couldn't go any further with that. We went as far as we could, and we remained friends. We never really had a breakup or anything like that, but we all decided to go solo. And my solo effort, I didn't know if I was going to go by my name or use a band name, but I ended up using a band name, Portraiture, because most of my inspiration for music comes from art. But to answer the question, Portraiture exists because I am sober. That was, I went as far as I could with the old band and partied and lived that lifestyle and had a great time until it started to really catch up and progress into a destruction. And after I started getting my sobriety together, and once I finally completely had it, meaning I am not completely cured by any means, but there was a change in my mindset.
Yeah.
Maybe in a few years I can go back and just dabble a little bit. No, it was when I say I got it means I just my mindset changed where I knew that I could not pick up one drink or one drug ever again.
Right.
So that was a big leap. I said to myself, I'm going to record an album of all my songs. I'm going to have a band, and I'm going to raise money through Kickstarter, and I'm just going to jump. Even though I'm freaked out, I'm afraid that nobody's going to care. I'm afraid that nobody really cares, and everybody said that they cared just because they wanted to party and be a part of the scene, but that wasn't the deal. I had a lot of support, and I managed to make the first album, Real as Ritual. And in Real as Ritual, the first album, it was kind of a backlog of songs from the Fellowship Students that were my songs, but we performed with that band. And so my sobriety had not caught up with the songs that were put on that first album because they were kind of backlogged. As Bjork did when she first came out, she had 3 albums. First was called, I can't remember, Debut, and then she had one called Post, and the Debut was to kind of get rid of her backlogged material, and then Post was kind of like looking into the future.
Right.
One of my big influences. But anyway,
Bjork,
yeah, she's great. It wasn't until I moved to New York and created Portraiture as it is now and found the new members of the band and then started playing in New York City. And then when we started work on our first album as that iteration, Cruel Yellow, then some songs about sobriety started to seep in. And I've always had subjects of personal growth and pain and aspects of psychology that I've put in my music, because my mom is a therapist, my father is a doctor. And so I was raised with a lot of therapy and medical language, and it's just what we would talk about around the dinner table.
Right.
So even when it wasn't sobriety based, it was definitely had a lot of themes of human nature and how we lie to ourselves about certain things, or how I lie to myself about certain things. Yeah. Issues of lust, of fear, some sort of political folly of not really choosing a side in politics, but sort of examining the insanity of some of the egoic mind that is behind politics, if we seek it for our salvation, even though it is very necessary to engage in politics and to do what your soul tells you to do about it. But there are aspects of it that are insane. Then the second album, Portraiture's second album, Cruel Yellow, features a song on it that is very directly related to wanting to die as a person who is addicted, and that person is me. And it's called "Time Is Blood on My Hands." And there came a point in my own addiction that I did not want to commit suicide. I didn't know how to do that, and I didn't want to do that, but I wanted to die. I wanted to be struck down, because I couldn't get drunk anymore. I couldn't get sober. If I got sober, I'd have seizures from withdrawal. I couldn't stay in a detox long enough because they wouldn't treat me. They wouldn't give me enough drugs to sedate me. I was just stuck in a jail of pain. And so I felt like having time, not working and just sitting around and having all this time was going to kill me. Just time itself would kill me if I couldn't fill the time with something else and get past this sort of Groundhog's Day of drinking.
Good analogy.
So it's a song that's very much about wanting to die, and in the climax of it that happens, I think it's about a minute into the song, it goes from a sort of a lovely folk sort of sotto voce ballad into this angry, goes up an octave in the voice, and it's I talk about a cruel joke of the creator to dangle life in my face. In my moment of clarity, in the night before I got sober, I yelled at God what I believe God to be, saying, if you wanted me to help this world and you wanted me to do things for this world, why would you afflict me with this? If you had such hope for me, as everybody has told me, if you had such, if you held my life in such regard, and if you do indeed exist, then what the fuck, why did you afflict me with this?
Yeah.
It's your fault. I don't want it. And I just repeated, I don't want it. I don't want it. Take it away from me. And that rage and communication, which some people who are believers or even agnostics, you can look at it on many different levels, and you could look at it on the psychological level of just reaching the end, or you could look at on the spiritual level of that communication had so much depth and connection to it because it was the most sincere it ever was. That is that's what's in that song. And I remember I called my mom after that moment, after that big yelling phase. I tried to fall asleep and I couldn't sleep.
Right.
And I called her at like 2 a.m. from New York, which was 3 Oklahoma time. And she answered and just stayed on the phone with me. Just prayed and just stayed there silently until I fell asleep. And it gave me enough momentum the next day to drag myself back to my support group, a very common fellowship for people who are alcoholics that I attended as what's his name? Host of the Late Show, Craig Ferguson. Craig Ferguson also battled with addiction, and he always referred to the group. He never referred to it by name, but he always said, "It's a group very near the front of the phone book." So
That's good.
anyway, that is contained in the album Cruel Yellow. That's the song "Time Is Blood on My Hands," and that is the sort of the nexus of the moment of clarity for me. So that's the long-winded way of answering the question that yes, just as Cruel Yellow is when issues of my sobriety started. There's another song called Fat Man on there, and it talks about a fat man, looking at all of the things like food, candy, and the lust of this particular character is lusting after the women he sees in New York City. Yeah. But this is me. This is all me as a sober person finding the new crutches of pornography, sugar, and food. And for me, it's less about pornography and more about sugar and food. Although I see pornography as a very big addiction for many people and a temptation for me, for sure. Right. And it's all, to me, it's that search for wholeness. Once you've taken away this thing, and all of a sudden these other behaviors wanted to fill the void in my life, and it's amazing having the language to deal with alcohol and drugs. At first, it did not detect these as problems, and then eventually, I was like, "Wow, I'm hiding these things, and I'm consuming these things more than I used to, and what's happening?" So
that's beautiful, man. Like seriously, this is why we talk about the idea of like the differentiation between this idea of recovering from versus recovering to. Like, and how much time do you have?
I have 9 years. It'll be 10 in November.
And well, congratulations. Like, so
Thank you very
you're
much.
just entering 9 years not long ago. So this is really, this is intriguing. So as you began the kind of, like replacement therapy and all of these other things, right? Like how long, or are you still, did you do that? And until it was like, oh, I got to check this, and then, oh, I got to check this, and until you felt like you were caught up, and you were like, okay, now I'm living my life, like without that.
How long it took until I started thinking clearly from my sobriety? It was about year 5, and it was a convergence of a couple of things. All of the tools I had learned about being sober, my brain healing, physiologically, and then reading Julia Cameron, The Artist's Way. I have to give props to my friend Ryan Bell. he's the one who turned me on to it, and it just created a huge surge in creativity through examining the self-doubt and all the voices that I had. So I had to confront a lot of inner critic at year 5. I didn't even know that that was a problem for me.
Right.
But inner critic was really keeping me stuck in a cycle of escapism from my own art, from my own original music. I had no problems doing arrangements and orchestrations of other people's music. That was still going strong, but my own music, I'd just get stuck in a rut and hate how derivative it would be, or feel like it wasn't formally different enough, and didn't, just all these things bothered me. And then I started working through her book and just doing everything she said.
Yeah.
And it made such a huge change in my life proper, not just creativity. It extended it to everything in my life. And the other person was Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, which was just a great repurposing of a lot of the Eastern philosophy, and intermingled with my upbringing, which was mostly from the Judeo-Christian standpoint, and sort of synthesizing it, and helped me sort of observe my mind. And for some reason, the language he used to convey an idea that's been around a very long time really helped me. And those two things really accelerated my life. Also, my wife and the relationship we have was instrumental in bringing tranquility and support and great things to my life at that point. So,
when you began your recovery, what did you think was never going to change? And today, you couldn't imagine how your mind even thought that possible.
Well, I would have to go back to being handcuffed to self-criticism. I thought that was going to be my life. I thought that I was going to have to toil creatively forever, and that was not the case. And so, thank you, Julia, for saving me from that. But yeah, that was something I thought that I would always be, would never have the spiritual valve opened enough to just let it flow and not judge everything that's coming out of my soul.
Right.
But that's changed. I now have a mechanism to just open the valve and completely circumvent the critic. And it's so important to me. I mean, there are a lot of practical things in life, like financial things or relationship things that could be the answer about changing. But I think from within, that was a very important thing for me, because I'm a person who does not believe that music is life or anything, or like art is life.
Yes.
I do not care.
No.
Music is not life. Art is not life. Life is life.
Yes.
And life is enhanced or described in some aspect by art or music. So I do not have this narcissistic, this personal attachment to an importance of being an artist and my creativity. Yes. That's not where I'm coming from. I'm coming from a place of that freedom of that aspect of my life translated into everything else, into my relationships, into my ability to lead or to follow in an organization, or to hang a bathroom cabinet, or
right, yeah.
Or just be able to see how my mind is working and how it's trying to sabotage me, and notice it. And that's probably the biggest thing is being able to sort of hear that voice and hear those memories and things that are trying to pull me down or sabotage me or tell me I can't do something.
Yeah.
And that was huge. And so I think that was the thing I thought would never change, but it did.
Did something happen, or did an action or scene take place in your life in which you realized that you were not criticizing yourself anymore?
That's an interesting question. There's a snapshot of me in my dorm room at Bard College, which is where we do the opera. My wife and I do an opera every summer. We live in the dorms at Bard and produce an opera over the course of a month and a half or so. But I always bring my equipment with me, all my guitars, my computer, and stuff like that. And while I was there, I didn't have any projects, any deadlines, nothing like that. And I was just opening a project and just laying something down without even a thought. Just not even thinking about it, just letting it flow, and then coming back the next day and doing something else to it, and not even really getting hung up about anything at all. And before I knew it, all the information was there for me to build what it was. I wasn't constantly killing it at the first minute. And I started feeling so alive. I felt like I could see the flow of the universal music. And I love how I believe it was Ioannis Xenakis, the composer, who had a form of composition called stochastic music, or a philosophy, whereby you, as a composer and artist, you're just sticking a spigot into the universe and turning on the faucet, and it's coming out. You're not at all responsible. You're just the person who's stabbing that membrane to open
creative
up
life
the valve.
Force of everything, right?
Right. So, like, taking my ego or my identity out of it and just putting the tap into the universe and opening it was beautiful. It was a beautiful communion with the creative force that is behind everything. And that's one time where I remember. And on our next album, those songs that I was building that way are going to be featured.
And how long ago
but
was
it's
that?
taken a long time. That was probably 2 years ago.
Yeah, see, things take time. Things take some
They
fucking
do.
time, dude. Like,
They
that's
do.
it. And I also wanted to step back and recall, like, yes, art is not life. I was not born, and my life does not start and stop with art. Like, by me taking my art outside of the art world was definitely a big thing. Where it's just like, it is not so important. I remember there was one time I was I was doing some video work, because I had a production company. I was doing some video work at a conference, and I was talking to the person who was setting up the conference, and I was like, holy hell, if I cared about this, I would really want to be here. Mm-hmm. And she was taken aback, going, people don't care about this? And I was like, yeah, no, this shit don't fucking matter. Like, no one cares about what you're talking about.
Right.
Just like nobody cares about what I'm painting or what I'm making or whatever. And that's okay. Right. That's okay, because it's not their job to care about it.
No.
It's my job to make it.
Yeah.
And if I don't, oh well, like my value can't be attached to that, and especially right? Like, so all of this stuff is so sobering.
It is. Right? That it is. That it is. Yeah, it's that is such a great realization, is that nobody cares. And to the to many people that might sound very cynical and very negative, but it isn't. It's that death that creates a death of my ego when I realized that nobody cares. So then what? If nobody cares and my self-importance is dead, then what? Well, I create for the sake of creation. And then the true universal vibration is within me, not the egoic mind. And oh my God, then for some reason that element of spirituality that is in the music that I didn't put my identity into is received with more care. People notice something about it. Not always, of course. And that's not something I depend on, but it's all about the what is the impetus? Is the impetus to get somebody to care, or is it to create for the creation's sake? And that's a big. I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's definitely something that is a guiding principle to me now. And nobody cares is such a beautiful mantra.
And I don't care in the most loving way. It's apparent. You're a parent. How were you a parent before your sobriety? How how did parenting change, solidify? What did becoming a parent in sobriety do for you, or what? I don't even know how to phrase that question.
Well, I tell you what, it creates all things. It kicks up all of the psychic dust of the past, rekindles the desire for escape in some of the old ways, and on the other hand, it kicks up the dust with more intensity, the glory of creation, the depth of love, and the desire to be dependable, respectable, a provider, a person who keeps people safe. So on the one hand, it's a fork in the road of advancing into actual maturity, because all my life I felt like I was like 17 or 18, no matter what age I was. Even when I got sober and became dependable and was always on time and always excelled at what I did, after I got sober, it didn't matter. I still felt like a youthful person who was not really an adult, who was just doing adult things.
Right.
But now I feel like an adult. I feel very much like an adult, and there's some trepidation in that, but it does the responsibility, the level of responsibility and attention, and how things don't always go the way you want them to. When your child is crying and you have used all the techniques you can to help them, you feel frustrated and bad about yourself, and then you start feeling frustrated at them. And this is very normal. Thank God in the parenting books it says, don't worry if you feel anger towards your infant. It's normal with all the sleep deprivation and the confusion of being a new parent. If you feel like you're getting out of control, you need to call somebody and get help. But to feel this way is normal. And that was very comforting to hear that this is a normal feeling, to feel angry. But it has raised the intensity of all things, the need to escape, and also the need to be present, and an even stronger force of sobriety. And so I'm still very much in the process of rediscovering who I am in sobriety and as a parent, because I'm only 5 months into this. And but oh gosh, the level of joy that can that can just, you have this sort of, I don't know if you remember in Peanuts cartoons when somebody was mad or discouraged, they'd just have a thought bubble with scribbles in it.
Yeah.
That's how life is, but on the bookends of it, it's just pure joy to know that you have this person you love so much that it hurts.
Yeah.
And everything is bookended by joy and happiness, even though in the middle it's like scribbles.
Yeah. Talk to me about, we talked at length about not caring.
Mm-hmm.
What does being able to step back and allow that child to be, especially when they're crying and there's nothing you can do? Like,
that has definitely been aided by my marriage and by having exactly the same goals for being parents as my wife, which are the knowledge that growth is essentially pain, and that we observe the world that we live in with our peers and with strangers who we've worked with. I used to teach music and knew a lot of excellent parents with excellent children. I knew a lot of excellent parents with difficult children. And I knew a lot of parents who thought they were excellent because they cared so much, but actually made it terrible. And it was the observation of the helicopter parenting, where no pain would go unsoothed, no experience would be gone into without fear. All of that, thankfully, through sobriety and through having to fall on my face by myself and pick my own self up, with the help, I had the help of other people, though, to direct me there. Obviously, it was not all on my own. I had much help and support through others. But it was through that experience that I am able to see moments that are safe times for the child to cry, to be discouraged, to have some pain within reason in order to achieve growth. For instance, being on the ground on their tummies, they have to learn to crawl at some point. And they get very frustrated not moving and being there in this position. And I hate to see him cry. I hate it. I hate to see his face in anguish looking at me and saying, "Help me." But the thing that I can do as a mature person is to know that help sometimes is in the experience of pain of growth.
right.
And so to leave him there for just a little bit longer, maybe to experience a time, learning to teach him how to take naps and go to bed properly. He's going to have to cry because he's all alone. And how much anguish I feel about his loneliness in his crib as he cries.
Right.
But as my wife and I, through the help of information and talking with other parents and through reading, learned how to train a child for sleep. It's very difficult to hear that loneliness and exile that the child is feeling, but to know intellectually and in your soul that this is what has to happen for this person to achieve personhood. And if it sabotages us, if this person's inability to sleep or to have some time alone ends up sabotaging us as the caretakers, we cannot take care properly if we are constantly being inundated with problems. So we, within reason, we have to,
of course, yeah.
we have to create an environment for growth, and a lot of that environment is created by our phrase that we've been using in this episode of not caring, or not caring too much.
Yeah,
which I'm
but
sure
not
we could
caring
change
in the most loving and supportive way possible.
Exactly.
Like sometimes caring isn't supportive at all. Like sometimes
Exactly.
it's destructive. And so when you leave your child alone, they experience trauma. And that's okay, right? Like it's not like we're going to keep them from experiencing trauma. Like
Right.
you can, like, they are going to experience trauma, whether that's in your overcaring, your undercaring, your caring to a point that you are where it's like, oh, you know what? You just need to be alone for a little bit. You just need to be, like you're going to, and that trauma, they are going to, as we did, embed perceptions of the world and how we are not good enough, or how we are going to be left, or how we are, like we're like whatever, your child is going to embed these perceptions because they don't have language. They don't understand what's going on in the other room. They don't understand.
Of course.
And so they are going to experience this trauma, and this is what they're going to have to deal with when they're 25, 26, 27. Because if they get put on this journey well enough, they'll be well adjusted enough. Of course, they're going to be rebellious as a teenager. And early 20s are going to be like, like really exploring things. But then as they start to really develop, in the 26, 27, 28, they're really going to be able to look at themselves, be self-reflective, and grow from and beyond that, to then recover themselves, that which they are giving up now, to the perception that they're picking up through the trauma they're experiencing because they don't understand things.
Yes. Yeah.
So
that's true. I mean, and I think, perhaps as we found the nearest tool that we could about, talking in terms of just the words and the phrases that we're using of like not caring, when what we actually mean, as you alluded to earlier, is it is caring. It is right. There is a form of caring inside of that. It's just a very different kind of mature caring. And also the word trauma, I think the word trauma is used a lot, but I think there's a better distinction between hurt and damage.
Right.
And, I always think of trauma as being damaging, but as hurt or pain, not necessarily being damaging, but actually might have at the end of it the lesson or the crossing of the threshold. It's the rite of passage, and that the rite of passage, in some cultures it can be very traumatic.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking of some of the teenagers as a tribe in Australia that there's a snake that does something to them, and I don't know, I can't remember, but it was in Joseph
Dramatic.
Campbell's book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, that talks about different rites of passage. But yeah, I think that understanding the difference between trauma, hurt, pain, growth, all of these things. But even if you did use the word trauma, it would be fine if you just called it a mini trauma.
Well, we're finding that, people that have experienced major trauma, when we can expose and open that trauma body, we can heal. And there is nothing that we can't heal from. Like that. And that's why I just say trauma, because if you get everything you want and then at 13 something gets kept from you, that's traumatic.
Sure.
I don't care what, and in turn, yes, you didn't get sexually abused, you didn't, these things didn't happen.
I see what you mean.
But your experience isn't sexual abuse, right? Your connection to that. And it's all about just oh my God, I'm experiencing this thing, and it is like we've seen, I saw the kid that got his video game taken away from him, and he's just thrashing around the room.
Yeah.
Right? That's damaging, not that it's not necessary, but
right.
What set up this child for that? Right?
Yes, to feel this damage. That is a really good point, because what that reminds me of is perhaps it's not necessary to change the word trauma. Perhaps it's more about defining who is responsible for healing from the trauma. Similarly, it's the idea that for me, alcoholism is a disease. Okay, when I was an active alcoholic, or even before that, and I heard alcoholism is a disease, on one level I was like, okay, I believe it. And then on the second level I was like, so what? People, if they have a disease, it's not their fault? It took a long time to figure out what that meant. And finally, it was made clear to me, no. Alcoholism being a disease does not mean that you are not responsible for the management of that disease.
Right.
You are responsible, if you are a diabetic, that if you have all the information, if you've been diagnosed, if you know that if you eat an entire chocolate cake that you're going to go through ketosis,
right,
then yes, we can yell at you. We can yell at you for being a diabetic who did not manage their symptoms after knowing.
right.
Now, of course, there are some gray areas in this, but I think similarly with trauma, I could use my trauma as a reason for not growing.
Yep.
I cannot grow because I've been too traumatized.
Yep.
Or you don't understand me.
Your absence of trauma as well.
Yeah.
You can utilize you can utilize anything to
Sure.
not grow, right? You can say,
Exactly.
oh, I'm too busy. Oh, I'm too broke. Oh, I'm too rich. Oh, I don't have to. Or oh, my friends don't support me. Or oh, like all of that is just more lies. Like, right? And that's what like as addicts, we're good at it. We're good at playing the victim. We're good. And that goes far and wide. Like, again, there are people that aren't dealing with drugs and alcohol, but they're dealing with Netflix. And
Yeah.
they don't see that as a problem because Netflix and everybody else is endorsing you to take it. Nobody's going out and, like the new Amazon, crack pipe is not being promoted as the new awesome thing that you're going to talk about at work.
Right.
So crack all of a sudden isn't fancy for you to be having an addiction in. Netflix or ordering on Amazon or like whatever you want to engage in, like as an addiction, as long as we don't call it an addiction, as long as everybody is behind us having this addiction, we're good.
Yep.
We're good,
Yep.
and I'm okay, and I don't have a problem. Well, look again, because we do, right? We have a problem as a society, hoarding money. Like how is this not seen as a problem, right? Like, well, and I know it is, but
yeah, absolutely, you're exactly right. And I see one of these instances in it's insidious in many ways, and that is the new destigmatization and legalization of marijuana. It naturally, it's fine that it's been destigmatized. It's fine that it has been that the laws have eased up on this. I'm totally behind that. But the insidious nature of it being safe, okay, or even perhaps there's that small segment that is medically useful in the management of certain symptoms that I'm sure is correct, but I think often an addict like me could take that and run with it and say, but it's medically medically good for this, and that's why I'm using it for it. Yeah. So I think that the rationalization, I think it's showing itself in cannabis use in very similar ways as Netflix is because it's okay now. I mean, thankfully, alcohol has been legal for so long, and maybe shouldn't be. But
I tell people all the time, alcohol is the only thing that if you use it enough and quit, it will kill you. Quitting will kill you. The only drug that quitting it will kill you. Sorry, that's a fact.
Sorry, heroin.
Yeah, no, heroin, whatever. You might die of dehydration.
Yeah.
But quitting heroin will not kill you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. People are shocked to hear that.
Yeah. They
What?
have no idea. Yeah. They're
Yeah.
just like, what? Like, I knew people who, like, I was just kind of like, wait, no, you've been drinking how much? You've been drinking like a fifth a day and you're in your 40s? Son, you better get your ass to a clinic, because if you do that on your own, your shit's going to fucking, like, stop.
Yeah.
And they have no idea. They have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like,
No.
oh, it's alcohol. I could buy it at the store. It'll kill you.
Yeah. It's amazing. And you know, because alcohol is more dangerous and marijuana is becoming legal, you know, then the rationalization comes out of well, it's way safer than alcohol. There's absolutely, there can't be a problem with this, but it just, you know, it's like anything.
And this is why I believe we should legalize all drugs and just say, you know what, heroin is legal and fucking crack is illegal, because then you have a real conversation, not like we've been waiting for marijuana so what? They fucking loosen the chains on marijuana. Like, give me a call when crack is on the market, because like, I don't want to buy either. But if we're openly selling them, we have to educate, and then we'll start educating a little deeper on alcohol, because now there's a bigger market for your drugs, right? Like, you're not just going to run. People are like, oh, well, you know, like on my weekend, I'm going to smoke some crack instead of like, you know, a fifth of Jack, like whatever, you know? And then all of a sudden it's like, well, we need to have this conversation. It needs to be a real conversation. It can't just be like, marijuana is good for you. No, it's not. Like, neither is sugar. Like, when we can start looking at these things, like, you replaced every crack house with a coffee house, and sugar is in everything that we eat, and you're going to tell me that, like, no, these are fine? No, it's not. It don't work that way. Don't work that way.
Nope.
I don't care in the most loving way.
That's right. Well, that's you know, that's the biggest problem for me these days is sugar, is that, you know, I don't consume sugar in my coffee or in my food, really, other than the highly processed bread and
you have a
like
child,
that.
You are eating processed food, period.
Yeah.
There's no way around that.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, that level of sugar is, you know, unless I am completely not eating any processed food, if I'm just eating like meat and, you know, quinoa and maybe fruit occasionally, which does have sugar, but you know, it's a controlled release.
It's good sugar, right?
It's good,
like, just
sugar,
like marijuana. Good sugar.
Just like marijuana. But the thing is like, okay, it's Friday. I have the day off tomorrow. What am I going to do with that? Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go across the street and I'm going to buy 3 black and white cookies, because I love black and white cookies. And you know what? Tastes great. And after I eat them, I feel like that didn't do for me what I thought it would.
No.
It's what I wanted, and then I had it, and it didn't do for me what I wanted it to. And you know, that's the relationship I've had with sugar lately, is that I have managed to reduce the amount of time I go on binges of sugar. Yeah. That was something I did when I turned 40. And I have successfully kept to that, reducing binge time.
Right, that's good.
So,
that's good. Like, you know, like,
it's a foothold.
That's something, you know, like that leads right into that question of like, what are the struggles that you're facing today? You know, like this idea of, you know, sugar, and it's a drug, and it is increasingly, I think, people are noticing more and more. This is just making me feel bloated.
Yeah.
Like, and gross. Like, why do I want that?
It was giving me migraines. You know, once I started managing my sugar intake and noticing things, my migraines started to ease up, and you know, it was very very telling, and I believe that it is very much a drug. There's no two ways about it, and that's one of the struggles I have these days. Sure. And it seems so shameful, because it's such a silly thing. And it's so okay. Yeah. But I treat it as if I'm buying a fifth of Alexi vodka, hiding it in a shoe, like in a boot, and then drinking it when nobody was watching and feeling ashamed about it.
I would suggest you listen to my interview with Joe Lawson, first episode I did with a guy, and he talks about his ice cream addiction, and he says, I will buy the 5 pints when they're on sale, and then I'll eat one whole pint one day, and then the next day I'll be like, there's more pints in there. It was good, And he was like, yeah, it's not that it's bad.
Right.
It's that I don't want to discredit it to the point that it is actually controlling my actions in some way. And that's the thing. It's like, yeah, okay, I can't, like, it's not the same as heroin.
No.
But it is. In some ways, it's like, this is very much just me escaping, just sitting quietly or being able to have this time, and then, like, if you look at, like, the duration of your sugar high, right? You get high and then it lets you off, and you don't even get as high as you want. So you need a different sugar, or you need something else or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it drops you off. And then you're like, oh, I'm not being a good parent. Or I'm not being, or I don't have the energy to go to practice, or I don't have the, and all of this.
Absolutely.
It's just like, well, what are you recovering to? Because if you know what you're recovering to, you're going to know what to do with that sugar eventually. And it doesn't matter if you revisit it every month or something, but it's eventually, that's the conversation that is going to just get it out of your system. And if you keep going to it, it's going to get more control.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I love about one of the books that helped me a lot in sobriety. Was called Moments of Clarity by Christopher Kennedy. I don't know, but it's a collection of essays from famous people and athletes and all sorts of people that helped me a lot think about the shameful disease of alcoholism that I had. And to see these successful people talking about how vulnerable they were really helped me think about alcoholism differently and my brokenness, and that I wasn't like just a terrible person, just like the lowest member of society, and that it was affecting all ranks and types of people. Now it doesn't make any difference to me, that idea of class or any of that, but it was a good entry point for me. But my favorite chapter in the book is Ed Begley Jr., who, if you like the Christopher Guest movies, he is featured in a lot of those. But he always talks about when he that he believed that drinking was always paying the interest of the problem, and that it was like a credit card, and you were just constantly paying interest, but you were never paying the principal.
Right.
And the day that you stop drinking and the day that you stop using is the day that you may feel terrible pain and DTs or whatever, but that's when you start paying the principal or the fundamental or the entire credit card. And I think that exactly like you said about recovering to this place, and how it's just going to constantly take control of you. It's just using the credit card and building up the interest, and you're just kicking the can down the road. And I don't pay the principle of it when I go to that. But
that's right.
I'm also not going to beat myself up.
Absolutely.
I am aware of it. I know how to improve. And I will feel ashamed when I fail, but I believe in progress, not perfection.
That's right.
And because as soon as you get in the shame cycle, it just compounds, and often, for me, it just compounds, and the shame makes you use the thing again,
right?
So you don't have to experience the confrontation of the shame. So,
and that's a big thing where it's like, once you feel it, speak it. You speak it, get it out in the open. Like today I spoke about my money shame. We spoke about sugar. We spoke about other things. It's like, once you start to talk about it, you're no longer held under its thumb, essentially. And it's be like, okay, I spoke about this. Now I don't have to revisit it. right?
Mhm.
And maybe I will at some point, and that's okay. Just like it's okay
Yeah.
if you pick up a fifth. Like,
Yeah.
that's your choice. It's like but you have another day tomorrow. What are your choices now, right? And are you moving towards something that's good for you? Because what are you moving towards? That's always kind of what I think about. Nathan, thank you so much. God, this has been the longest interview I've ever done.
You are welcome, my friend. And I'm so glad.
I'm
so happy that you have designed this focus because these were difficult questions to answer, and if they were difficult, then it meant that that I had not really thought of them. And so I think this is an extremely valuable podcast and an extremely valuable focus on recovering to something. I think it's profound, and I encourage you to keep going. And I certainly appreciate all of your guidance and your commiseration.
Yes.
And the idea that you've created.
I want to thank Nathan for all his insight and support in sharing with us on this podcast. You can find Portraiture's albums Cruel Yellow and Real as Ritual on Spotify and Apple Music. Nathan is also a choral singer, and you can find links to more information about him and his work in the description of this episode. Without people like him and my other guests, I couldn't paint a complete picture of what recovering ourselves looks like. You see, everyone is going to recover themselves in a unique way because we're all unique. That means there's no concrete answer to how you are going to recover yourself. Listening to this podcast exposes you to information and ideas about how some of us with long-term sobriety have approached and achieved amazing lives, filled with the ability to be vulnerable, trust, and love. And I hope this podcast is a light for you, guiding the way to your recovering of yourself. This podcast can be used by counselors and groups to discuss big-picture recovery and how recovering ourselves is a journey we are all on, regardless of our past. Consider heading over to anchor.fm and supporting this podcast with a donation. While you're there, feel free to leave me a voice message with comments, suggestions, and criticisms, all of which I would be grateful to receive. If you are someone in long-term recovery and can relate to the concepts presented here, reach out to me on my website or social media. Once again, I'm your host, managing long-term sobriety, MartinJon, and until next time, keep recovering yourself.